Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Camazotz. Camazotz is a flexible assassin in SMITE, working exceptionally with both full damage and bruiser style builds. And in turn, he's good in both the solo lane and in the jungle. Here's builds for both roles, and to be clear, bruiser is not limited only to the solo lane and full damage isn't limited only to the jungle. Relics wise, in the jungle you want to go blink and then beads, and in the solo lane it's the typical teleport and beads for solo lane assassins. Camazotz has one of the more complicated passives in the game, so let's not waste any time and get right to it. The first part of the passive starts us off slow. Camazotz has 6% built-in lifesteal, and any healing he receives by himself or from others is increased by 6%, which is great for counteracting anti-heal. His passive meter springs to life when he enters combat, but this is completely irrelevant to how the passive functions. Camazotz has access to the increased healing and lifesteal at all times. This second part is where things get more complicated. Every time any god dies, even when Camazotz is in no way involved with the kill or even close by, a small pool will spawn at their death location. Camazotz and only Camazotz can see and interact with these pools. When Camazotz stands on top of the pool, he begins to drink from it, restoring a flat 2% of max health and mana to himself per drink, and can drink up to 10 times from the same puddle, meaning that he can regen up to 20% of his health and mana, but Camazotz is able to drink from 2 pools at once, so simple enough is how the pools get put on the ground. Any god dies, and there's a pool. Stand in the pool to drink from it. The bigger question is when to drink from the pools and when to just move on from it in the match. 2 main factors, where the pool is and the current game state. For instance, say it's the early game. Say you get a kill in the mid lane, and now the pool is at the top of the mid lane while you have back camps and buffs to get. In this case, you wouldn't want to drink from the pool since you'd be wasting precious time leading to staggered buff timers. And not to mention, you're staying far away from where the farm on the map is, so in this case, you want to get the kill and just forget about the pool left behind. In the solo lane, however, let's say you get a solo kill, which does tend to happen as Camazotz, and in this case, you absolutely want to stay and slurp up that, well, it's clearly not blood, so lane, but keep in mind too that the pools stick around for a while, so you might actually want to take this opportunity to TP back to lane, and now you have this free little sustain pool to drink from and make fighting you almost impossible. Needless to say, very open-ended. A decent rule of thumb is just looking at your minimap and looking for something you could be doing, like XP camps or helping teammates, and just ask yourself, can I afford to stand still for 10 seconds? And just as importantly, am I going to be returning to base soon anyways? I could go on with other scenarios, but we'd be here all day. I'll just say that in the early game, you don't want to stick around and drink them if you're a jungler since momentum is so important. Then in the mid to late game, only ever use them if they're easily accessible during a fight, or just drink them after a fight has concluded, and again, if you're not just going to go back to base in 30 seconds anyways. While that took longer than expected, let's get to a simpler one with Camazotz's first ability. Camazotz fires a medium speed projectile which will pass through minions but not walls, and will stop on the first enemy god hit. When a god is hit, the ability will echo back towards Camazotz, this portion of the ability having no impact on anyone other than Camazotz. If Camazotz comes in contact with the echo, he gains a significant physical power boost as well as vision of the enemy he hit for a huge 15 seconds. So basically the entire duration of a gank or a team fight. A very unique ability, but luckily for once, quite simple in its execution. First and foremost, this is of course Camazotz's wave clear in the solo lane, and what he uses to wipe camps off the map in the jungle. Just leash the jungle monsters towards you and bam. Speaking of which, before I lose my chance, Camazotz is one of the best hit chains in the assassin class. He basic attacks twice normally, then winds up for a final AoE strike, meaning he can easily melee the middle minion, one the camp, and then basic it down from there. This of course also works beautifully in the solo lane as a wave suppressant. Not much to say about this basic attack chain other than never forgetting about it and always angle yourself to hit the maximum number of enemies possible with a single strike. Back to Cama's first ability, and I have similarly few words left for it. You use it whenever you intend to kill, grab the echo if you can, usually by using it close up so the echo comes right back at you, and chase from there. Chase with what, you ask? Cama's second ability, of course. Camazotz fires a projectile, again. Except this one has a long wind-up, still doesn't go through walls, but most importantly gets stopped by the first enemy hit it comes in contact with. The projectile does heavy damage and slows, then deals a significant damage over time afterwards. Once this damage over time ends, Camazotz is healed for a scaling amount, scaling with power in this case, and if the target dies before the damage over time ends, Camazotz gets to heal early. So the first question is, which do you use first for ganks, year 1 or year 2? Well, since, spoiler alert, this is Camazotz's only form of CC in his entire kit, it makes sense that you want to start with it. Not to mention this ability has a frankly absurd 10-second cooldown at base, meaning that it can get to 8 seconds with Jotun's Wrath all the way down to 6 seconds at full CDR. So starting fights with it means that you can easily get more than one use out of it during a gank and certainly during a team fight. But I'm getting ahead of myself, there's a whole nother passive attached to this ability. If you merely land this ability on a buff holder, i.e. the big guys in the middle of the camps who drop the buffs when they die, the oracles of the Guild Fury, the big scorpion guys in the soul lane, or even the Indra's scepter holder at the dual lane side of the map, Camazotz will gain a stack. Each stack grants Camazotz 3% lifesteal, which is great, but even better, he gains 3% healing increase, which will of course stack with his constant 6% healing increase from his passive. He can have up to 3 of these stacks, and adding a new stack will refresh the timer on this, which is a whopping 5 minutes and will persist through death. This of course is the missing piece of the puzzle while clearing I mentioned earlier. Basics, 1, then 2 whenever you get a clear shot at the center monster. You want to do this as often as possible to keep this passive up, despite the mega 5-minute timer, since it's essentially Camazotz' most consistent way to successfully chase people down and, not die. Well, speaking of chasing down, let's get to Camazotz' third ability. Camazotz leaps forward both shortly and slowly, but with good reason. He damages enemies in the AoE, but more importantly heals for every enemy hit in the AoE. Typically abilities like this tend to have a limit on how many times you can heal off for each enemy hit, but not here. If you stack up a full wave as Camazotz and jump on him, you can easily gain more than a third of your life back. That's of course targeted at Camazotz in the soul lane, and it's the biggest reason for his prominence there since day one of his release. In the soul lane, you do still want to focus on your first and second abilities for damage on waves and gods alike, but the heal on this ability is more than enough to keep up with any good soul lane god's sustain in lane. Back to using this in ganks and teamfights though, and it has to be said that it's one of the weaker movement abilities in the assassin category. It's just so slow, so you kinda have to Sharingan it on faster moving targets. Again, hence why you want to blink 1-2 or blink 2-1 to get things going. Then use this ability since using it raw can be rather troublesome. It is, however, still a leap, so you can easily chase people over walls or get yourself over walls while being chased. All this talk about chasing down and getting away has got me in the mood to talk about his ultimate though, which is the king of assassin abilities in terms of dealing unavoidable damage while yourself being untouchable. Camazotz becomes CC and damage immune and flies into the air for 4 seconds. During this time, he can swoop down and deal damage to all enemies in the area, dealing bonus damage if he hits multiple gods during each respective dive. The best part of this though is that Camazotz remains CC and damage immune while in the air, even when diving down for damage. At the end of the 4 seconds, Camazotz will be forced to land, but he will always land if you go through with all 3 dives. I'd wager to say it's the absolute perfect finisher and chase down tool for an assassin in SMITE. Naturally, chasing down with this ability speaks for itself. You do the usual assassin fare of blinking in, doing your main combo in order to make them use their movement ability, chasing for as long as you can with your 3, then boom, ultimate to finish them off, or use it to get away if things get too spicy for the pepper. That's how ganks as a jungler and all-ins on your lane opponent in the soul lane go, but in teamfights things are a different affair. Camazotz likes to sit back a bit, just in range for himself to blink and land his 1 or 2. You want to blink in after both your main engage on your team and your secondary engage have both been performed, and you almost immediately ult after connecting your second ability, or even just your first ability if there's too much damage on the enemy team. From there, you want to ult immediately and be dealing as much damage as possible to as many people as possible, setting yourself up for that final third swoop to either get into the enemy's team's backline or be to retreat. And this is why we didn't use our 3 when first blinking in and went straight for the ultimate, so we could use it later on to chase down or get out. In some hyper late game situations when your damage is reaching critical mass, or when the enemy team is simply damaging you too much to safely blink 1-2, you can actually just blink and go straight into your ultimate. They can't easily avoid the 720 damage with 105% power scaling ability, which gets potential bonus damage, making it do well over 1000 damage in the late game. So it's the perfect way to chunk the hell out of any squishy targets, and enables you to get in the backline to plant your final few abilities and easily finish someone off. Going a more bruiser route, you generally do the same sort of plays, except this time you want to land yourself directly in the squishy target's faces rather than giving yourself some room to use your ranged abilities. As bruiser Camazotz, you want to be getting right up in people's faces and chasing them down with basic attacks, which are of course enhanced by your first ability and made possible thanks to the slow in your second ability. So to put it more simply, when it comes to late game teamfights, full power Camazotz wants to rely mostly on his abilities and raw damage, whereas bruiser Camazotz, as well as Camazotz in any fights before your damage becomes crazy at around the 4th item slot, you want to use your abilities more so to set yourself up for chasing down targets with basic attacks. On that note, here are some combos with Camazotz. 1-2 or 2-1, whichever is easier at the time. 3-1-2 basic attacks. 1-2, walk up and basic attack, chase into 3. 2-3, basic attack, 1, chase with basic attacks. Blink, 2-1, try to walk up in basic, chase with your 3, and finally use your ultimate if you can secure the kill. Blink, ultimate, land in their face, 1, basic, 2, basic, chase down with your 3. For ability leveling, you want your 1 at level 1, your 2 at level 2, and your 3 at level 3. From there you want to max your 1, your 2, then your 3, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. In solo lane, you used to max the 3 first, but I've seen no high level players doing this, and in my experience, Camazotz's sustain is good enough with it at level 1 for most of the match. Everybody knows about gods like King Arthur, Yamoja, and Set, who seem to just be immune from having a genuinely weak state for more than a single patch. But Camazotz, ever since his release, has been the sleeper assassin to me. Don't get me wrong, he's had his time in the sun too, especially in the solo lane, but in all the years I've played him, I've never picked Camazotz and gone to regret it. His short cooldowns, his good clear, his absurd sustain, and that absolutely perfect ultimate makes him great in almost every situation. Anti-heal's a pain, sure, but despite healing being the cornerstone of Camazotz' design, it rarely ever gets shut down by anti-heal alone, outside of Cursed Donk of course. Admittedly, if you're not able to get a good ultimate off in fights, his team fights are pretty weak unless your teammates are doing the heavy lifting for you. But again, if you master how, but especially when to use the ultimate, there's really nothing the enemy team can do about this 1000 plus damage AoE ability, so Plus anyways, his ganks tend to be really good. Simplicity is king in this case. Sure, a slow isn't great CC like Sasana or Thor, but sometimes all you really need is that slow to just walk up and start decking people with your wings? Actually, does he hit you with his wings or his little hands on his wings? Well, anyways, that's all I have on Camazotz for now. Thanks for watching.